Great, so let's get started with the first presentation, which is entitled Improving Equity in Personalized Learning Through a Multi-Tiered System of Support Program. And let's welcome Eva Dundas of Branching Minds.
Hi, thank you, Elliot. It looks like I updated the title on this slide, but I promise you a big part of this will be about improving equity. For this first part of the presentation, I just wanted to show some of the broader data that we collected through this project with through the Leon Lowenstein Foundation. And then in the breakout session, I want to dive into this issue of equity in terms of personalized learning, and particularly some challenges we saw around that in the data that we collected through this program. So can you advance the slide, please? Or I'm sorry, just to give you an introduction to myself. I'm Eva Dundas, and I'm the Chief Learning Officer at Branching Minds. All right, and next slide. So what is MTSS? If you can just click forward a few times. I made the rookie mistake of not removing these animations. So if you can click through just like 3 times, that'll be fine. All right, so MTSS is a system-wide approach to providing instruction or intervention to students at varying levels of need and at varying levels of intensity based on specifically what that individual student needs at a given time. So this is a 3-tiered system, typically, where you see all students are receiving a foundational core curriculum that is grounded in evidence. And then students who are at a little higher risk for falling behind are receiving some more strategic support or instruction in small group. And then students who really are at risk for falling behind are receiving that more personalized one-on-one instruction that's custom to their particular needs. This MTSS model is really kind of evolved into this holistic approach of supporting students. So it's not just about academics, but taking into account social and emotional needs of the student as well. And really at its foundation, it's a data-driven approach that involves this problem-solving practice where you're really trying to uncover or identify particular issues that may be interfering with a student's academic journey, and then devising this plan to really support them in the way that they need, and then using data to monitor how that plan is working, and then revising the plan as needed. So if you can go to the next slide and just click through a few times. The MTSS framework, like I said, is based on this problem-solving model, but it consists of a few core components. So first is that primary instruction that is grounded in evidence-based, delivered to all students, and is also differentiated for those students at any given point in time. The next is a screening process. So an assessment is a quick assessment is administered to students to identify those who are at risk for falling behind or not meeting grade level expectations. And then based on those students who are at risk, plans are created either in those group situations where you're focused on just that supplemental support or instruction tailored to those students' needs, all the way up through an individual support plan where it's really custom to identifying the issues that that particular student is struggling with. And then all students who are receiving that additional support plan are monitored in terms of if they're on track to meet their goals to get back to where they need to be. And then data is used to adjust that plan based on how that student is responding. And so I know you're all thinking that we're here to talk about personalized learning and going off on this MTSS track. But one way that we're really thinking about how MTSS works in terms of supporting personalized learning is that it's helping to establish the infrastructure and systems to be able to deliver a personalized learning program at scale in a really efficient way. So, and one thing that we've seen with working with our district partners is that once they do have these systems in place and they're creating these goals for students and assigning differentiated strategies or interventions, once that is streamlined for those struggling students, they really are able to expand to the general population of their school in terms of making plans for gifted and talented or students who are at that tier 1 level. And so if you move to the next slide. So the application that we have at Branching Minds is really intended to provide that system and structure to be able to deliver this MTSS practice. And so what we do is we pull in any assessment data that schools are using, help them identify which students are struggling based on that assessment data, and then help them find interventions that are aligned with the particular needs of that student. And then they are collaboratively creating goals for individual students and then assigning those interventions into a structured plan for those students. And then collaboratively, teachers and students can then monitor their progress towards meeting their goal, and then be able to communicate that out with other staff and families as well. So if you can go to the next slide. This web application really allows us to collect a rich set of data around how students are responding to individual learning plans and what particular components of MTSS are really supporting growth within this learning plan framework. So the data that we're able to collect, like I said, we have normed assessment data. We're ingesting all students at our district partners get an account. So we're ingesting all that information from the student information system, which most often gives us demographics. And then importantly, we're able to document the details of their support plan. So what strategies they're using, how frequently they're being delivered, kind of in what context and over what time, so that how we can see how that aligns with their academic growth on those assessments that we're collecting. And so the data set that we looked at for this project was from 16 different districts across 6 states, ranging in locale and poverty level, meaning we had districts that were rural, suburban, and urban, and then ranging from low to high poverty levels as well. And the sample we collected consisted of 300,000 students who had pre and post test data on the NWA map. And so if you're familiar with the map and screening, it's typically done fall, winter, and spring. And so what we did is we took all students who had data either between the fall and winter window or the winter and spring window. And then we looked at which students had support plans created during those individual windows for at least 3 consecutive weeks during that window. And so that left us with 58,600 students that had a particular learning plan on the platform. So if you can move to the next slide. So with this data set, some of the questions that we sought to examine were, are we seeing a positive impact of learning plans on student academic achievement? And I'm going to do a deeper dive into all of these questions and how we looked at them in the breakout session, but I just wanted to give everyone kind of a preview of what we saw. And so we did see a significant impact of having a learning plan on academic achievement. I will show you a graph on the next slide. We compared these two, oops. Yeah, so what we did is we looked at the students who had that plan, and they made on average 3 percentile point gains over those comparison students that did not have a plan in place. And that's both in reading and in math. This is not a randomized control study, so the researcher in me wants to make you aware of that. We did do controlling for baseline performance, demographics, and grade. But we did not, it was not a rigorously controlled study. So just keep that in mind, that these are more considered correlational, or in ESSA guidelines, these are promising data about the impact of plans. So if you can go back to the previous slide briefly. So One other thing we were looking at is, are students seeing equitable achievement? And so yes, we did see equivalent rates of growth across demographics. If you were in the previous session, unfortunately, equivalent rates of growth is not enough. We do need to actually see higher rates of growth for these minority students in order to close that achievement gap. But we did see a statistically higher rate of growth or closing of the gap for students that had plans versus those who didn't. Then we were also interested in looking at, are we seeing equitable implementation of plans? And unfortunately, no, we did not see that. We actually saw that minority students were much less likely to receive a support plan. And so that is what I want to take a deep dive into the breakout session. And we also have a fuller length webinar that we did with Aurora Institute that I think is up on your website still. So I'm getting a thumbs up from Elliot. So the last thing we wanted to look at, which may be of interest to people here, is that we looked to see if there's a difference between student achievement for online adaptive personalized learning programs versus these teacher and student created personalized learning plans that were composed of different learning supports or strategies. And interestingly, and maybe not surprising to the people in this webinar, we did not actually see a difference in student achievement between these two forms of personalized learning plans. All right, so if, happy to unpack all of this and dive into the equity of implementation during the breakout session. If I'm not joined by you, again, please, check out the webinar that we have up on the Aurora Institute page.
Eva, thank you so much. And it's great to hear how Branching Minds is helping schools target instruction and intervention in such a personalized way. And yes, Eva did a terrific webinar recently for the Aurora Institute, and it is available on our website under the events and webinars area.